One of the reasons why some people don't believe that climate change poses an existential threat to civilization, or why they might think we're perhaps in a better position to confront climate change than we are, is invariably because many people quite reasonably assume that society would not knowingly destroy itself. To put a finer point on it, many people assume that oil executives would not knowingly and willingly destroy their own children's futures. As an example of this very natural assumption, listen to this brief exchange between Alex de Koning and Nicky Campbell in a BBC radio interview on November 7th, 2024, just ahead of the COP29 climate change conference in Baku, Azerbaijan.
This year there's going to be 6 times as many, I think, fossil fuel delegates as are indigenous people.
Isn't it good that they're there, engaging?
No, not at all. It's like putting a fox in charge of the chickens.
They're not in charge. They're contributing and
They're not contributing. They're lobbying. There's far more fossil fuel lobbyists than there are renewable lobbyists, far more fossil fuel lobbyists than delegates of any other country. It is terrifying how much control they have over this political system.
Aren't they saying, how can we get on board with this and utilize these technologies for our business model in the future? I'm glad you found it amusing. Go on, what?
50 years they have been trying to cover up the climate science. 50 years. ExxonMobil has dramatically accurate climate science predictions since the 1970s, which they did not share, and they've been putting advertising campaign after advertising campaign.
I think about my children. I think about my grandchildren. I think about my great-grandchildren, and I think it's grim. It's awful. It's a part of it. It's a constant dark cloud over my life since I read the science, since I got my head around this. It's awful. It infects my thoughts in the middle of the night. Why don't they think about their grandchildren?
I don't know. I think they can protect their grandchildren with all the money they're going to make. I think they're more focused on their career than they are about the bigger picture. I think in general humanity is too short-sighted when it comes to big issues like this. But I think that's entirely the reason why we all need to step up and say to these oil and gas people, say to the politicians, this is not acceptable. This is life or death. My kids are going to really suffer unless we all stand up and speak out on this.
Now, interestingly enough, we see in this brief exchange that Alex de Koning, a climate activist with Just Stop Oil, and Nicky Campbell, a broadcaster with the BBC, are both unclear as to why oil executives could possibly find themselves in a position where they are knowingly working against the best interests of their own children. For his part, Nicky Campbell assumes that oil executives must care about their children and therefore could not possibly be pursuing efforts that would jeopardize the future well-being of those children. Alex de Koning expresses a more cynical view wherein he assumes that oil executives believe that the wealth they personally stand to gain from the sale of oil and gas will outweigh the harm that climate change poses for their children. Sadly, it is most likely that both of those assumptions are incorrect. And the reason why this is the case is owing to the governing structure of corporations and the incredible hold that corporations have on all levels of society, including governments and intergovernmental agencies. There is little doubt that in today's world, corporations, not governments, and certainly not citizens, determine the vast majority of all economic decisions made in society. Sadly, the people who are responsible for the day-to-day operations of a corporation may very well be kind, compassionate, and reasonable, but that does not mean that the corporation itself will behave in a kind, compassionate, or reasonable manner. To help us get our heads around this paradox, take a look at this short clip from the iconic 2003 Canadian documentary, The Corporation.
A corporation is an organisation of individuals, and this individual is part of that corporation. So he's responsible for the act.
As a public demonstration, it wasn't very effective. There were only two. This is a very rural area, 2 people and a dog, and it's not a very big house, which I think rather surprised them. But then we sat down and talked to them for a couple of hours, and we gave them tea and coffee, and they had lunch on our lawn.
Well, there's another coffee coming. There's no. Who wanted? Sorry about the soya. Anyway, I've not put down yet.
No need for you to be deceitful. Why didn't you just ask me whether I was in?
I know, can we hang a murderer's banner?
After about 20 minutes, they said, well, the problem's not you, it's Shell. So I said, no, wait a minute, let's talk about what is Shell. It's made up of people like me. In the end, what we found in that discussion was all the things that they were worried about, I was worried about as well. Climate, oppressive regimes, human rights. The big difference between us was I feel that I actually can make a contribution to this. These people were frustrated because they felt they had nothing to do.
Here's the problem. A corporation as an entity is not controlled by its workers, its executive, its CEO, or even its board of directors, but by its stockholders. And even though most stockholders are also quite likely to be kind, compassionate, and reasonable people, nobody ever buys stock to not make money. So when it comes to stock performance, everyone has the exact same goal, to maximize profit. Take a look at this clip.
It's about competition. It's about market share. It's about being aggressive. It's about shareholder value. What is your stock at today? If you're a CEO, do you think your shareholders really care whether you're Billy Buttercup or not? Do you think that they would prefer you to be a nice guy over having money in their pocket? I don't think so. I think people want money. That's the bottom line. That's the bottom line.
Not only do stockholders want to make money, they want to make as much money as possible, as quickly as possible. If they determine that they can make more money buying one stock over another, then they will sell their underperforming stocks in order to buy higher performing stocks. What this all means is, if the people running a corporation don't do whatever they can to generate as much profit as possible, as quickly as possible, then those people will simply be replaced by people who will. Believe it or not, CEOs are as vulnerable to being fired as rank and file workers, and poor earnings and struggling stock performance consistently top the list of reasons why CEOs get shown the door. 3 notable CEOs lost their jobs for these very reasons just within the last year alone. They include Lakshman Narasimhan, CEO of Starbucks, who was let go amidst pressure from activist investors, particularly Elliott Investment Management, that had been pushing for measures to boost Starbucks' share price. Bob Bakish, CEO of Paramount Global, who was sacked as the company grappled with declining cable audiences, streaming competition, and pressure to enhance shareholder value. Stephen Scherr, CEO of Hertz, who was terminated after he handed Hertz its largest quarterly loss in 3 years. In the corporate world, the reality is clear. You do whatever it takes, or you're gone. In the endless pursuit to achieve higher profits and enhance shareholder value, corporations routinely bend rules, break laws, and engage in unscrupulous behavior.
My work spans all industry sectors. I virtually have worked for, I'd say 25% of the Fortune 500. I've posed as an investment banker. I've posed as a venture capitalist. I set up front companies that are executive recruiting firms. Essentially, I'm a spy. I'll locate your employees and I will tell them that I'm calling from Acme Recruiting Agency and that I've got a job that pays them considerably more than what they're paying. Would they mind meeting me for an interview? And when the executive shows up, what he doesn't realize is I'm actually debriefing him on behalf of a competitor, and that there is no job, and that the office that he's at has been rented, and the picture on my desk of my family is a phony, and it's all just a big elaborate ruse to glean competitive information from him. I don't feel any guilt. It's, you know what, you have to expect that guys like me are out there. We're predators. We're predators.
What this means is that corporations will, at the end of the day, pursue any means necessary to maximize their short-term profits without consideration of future impacts or ramifications or even future revenue flows. As such, corporations do indeed have the capacity to act without conscience or remorse. In other words, owing to the very nature of the corporate governing structure, corporations can and often do behave as classic psychopaths. To learn more about the tendency for corporations to behave in a somewhat psychotic manner, take a look at the 2003 documentary, The Corporation. I'm Art Lightstone, your green neighbor, asking you to take good care.